Hi, thought would go ahead and get chapter 5, 6, and 7, my thoughts and comments out to you. I am videotaping from my apartment. Can't get into the building because of the tornado. I'll make sure you knew I was not advertising for Pepsi necessarily, just the shirt I'm wearing, and didn't want to change it into anything else. However, I have consumed some Pepsi products in my life. Not getting any kickbacks, however. Hope you guys are doing well. That you're enjoying the book. Again, I find it's very, very easy reading. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm reading at night before I go to bed, and I'm reading again during the day, and I'm taking notes. I've found that, and I'd recommend you do this if you have a book that you really like, whether it's an academic book using for class that you've taken, or a book like the Langer book that's kind of a overarching book that will maybe inform the way you think or how you do things. Go ahead and write in the book. Of course, it's up to you. But I find if I highlight in the book or write in the margins of the book, even if I go back and I see things differently than I did when I initially wrote in the book, it reminds me of things in my mindset at that time, and I think it's a good way to keep up with those things. And if you use those materials in the future with your own students, kind of have your thoughts already written down and that kind of thing. I really liked her talking about Napoleon in invading Russia, a story about him getting close to Moscow and the Russian leader at that time deciding to set Moscow afire and leave so that Napoleon would wander in, I guess not wander in, march in, and feel invigorated by his ability to get that far. However, as we know from history, War and Peace, of the literature, the Russian winter was incredibly hard on them, and in the long run was not beneficial. So just her putting that into the idea of categorizing things into process versus product. Napoleon being very, very determined on the product, which was invading Russia successfully. However, the process, what was actually happening day to day, as his army got further and further away from supply lines and further into Russia, and then the Russian winter taking over, plus discovering a evacuated Moscow, fit the end product, which was successful invasion. However, all the processes, all the things that were taking place during that time, was part of his undoing, and all those things did not fit categorically into what he had preconceived as success. She continues to talk a lot about creation of new categories of things, the way we think of things, which I think she does brilliantly, as well as this idea of being open to new information and the thought that there's more than one perspective to everything. As I stated last time, I certainly think in music education we get locked into our ideas a lot. I went to a Georgia Music Educators Convention probably 5 or 6 years ago, and a friend of mine and I were doing a session based on an article we wrote for the instrumentalist called Good to Great, basically how to take your band program from being just average or good to really being great. The editors kind of put us under a lot of restraints, and so the article is not exactly what I would want it to be, but we did suggest 9 things to do. And one of the things we suggest is start with a small group of students that you think will buy into your philosophy, buy into some things that you want to do. And if you can hook them and get them on your side, then they can get their friends on their side, and those things grow exponentially, kind of like a pyramid scheme, I guess, for making money. But that whole idea of, certainly in the context of an organization like a band, choir, orchestra, if you're trying to move forward and change people's mindsets, you've got to get them to recontextualize, rethink, reinvent their thoughts. What we do subconsciously is through our actions we convince students this is what band is, or this is what choir is, or this is what orchestra is. I often I wonder about those people that transfer high schools and go from a really bad band program to a really good one. Do we lose some of those kids at the really good one because they can't fit in? It bands something so different than what they're used to. Of course, anecdotally, there's some research, but we would assume that really, really good programs are fairly organized and students are fairly disciplined and so on and so forth. So maybe someone loved band. It was very, very loose, and kids were allowed to express themselves in inappropriate ways, maybe band didn't play very well, but the students had fun and laughed a lot, and so they go to this great program where great music making is happening, and they just feel more restrained. And they go, "I don't like band." What do you mean you don't like band? What they really mean is they don't like the new band situation that's being defined for them. I think all this fits too within music education, the dilemma that we now have, that we've strapped on our own backs, to have to defend music in our schools. Although we reported, I say we, some people reported that music makes you smarter. It's now part of the modern day vernacular of raising babies, of justifying music in our schools, and there's just no proof. Music doesn't make you smarter. Smart kids are attracted to music, and lots of smart kids stay in music programs. There are some brainwave activities that are different when we're exposed to music, and we have shown that possibly spatial relationships skills get better when exposed to music, but that those go away very, very, very quickly. Meaning that those things you gain through music exposure may not last more than a day or two, and that those things happen with very, very, very young children. However, we've got to figure out how to change that, take it out of the context of telling people that music makes you smarter helps justify our program staying in the schools. We need to look at how to redefine, recategorize, rename, and reattribute music's outcomes as helping us to become smarter. I love that she talks about children recreate. I remember my Uncle B, yes, that's his name, B, named after my grandfather, whose name was A.B., kid you not. A period, B period, had a son that he named A period, B period. He's actually junior, but everybody called him B, as not to be confused with his father. I'm talking about being, very, very poor, growing up in South Mississippi and using Coke bottles as trucks. He would play in the dirt with them, and they were trucks. So he was reusing the Coke bottle in that very creative way. And then as we get older, we see Coke bottles as Coke bottles. They hold Coke, or maybe they hold water, or maybe they could be a flower vase. But I don't know if we think too much more outside of that. Yet as a very young child, he's thinking very creatively that it's a truck. There are no wheels. There's no engine. It's kind of shaped long like a truck is shaped long, but that may be the only thing that they have in common. And so as she talks a lot about this renaming and recategorizing things, seeing things in a different light, I think a lot about those kind of creative things that young kids do that we tend to not do as adults. Okay, letting new information in. She talks about this a lot, and I thought about us as large ensemble directors. How often do we let new things in by looking at the process and not the product necessarily? How much fun can we have today? How much new information can I give them today? How much can I reinforce from what we've done in the past, as opposed to how can I get this to sound better and not have as many mistakes so that we do well at contest? I've talked about that some in the past. I want to throw that out there. One of the notes that I took, as I continue to read the book, I'm constantly thinking about that, reevaluating, even not just having one great rehearsal day because we've kind of thought more about the process than the product, but a good 10 minutes, the first 10 minutes of class, the second 10 minutes, the third 10 minutes. Can there be something really special, interesting in that process that makes our classes more exciting, more rewarding for our students? Also reminds me somewhat of a story, and I looked online and I couldn't find it, and I'll keep looking. I read a story, probably 7th, 8th, maybe 9th grade. There was these two men that were both wealthy and constantly arguing and constantly competing against each other. And through a series of different events, they decided to make a bet. And this one man agrees to be locked away in the tower of the second man's castle for, 30 years, something like that. Now, the caveat being anything he requested he could get. The man who owned the castle, as himself, were incredibly wealthy. So if he asked for caviar and champagne, he would get it. The finest of whatever could be offered. He would have access to those things. However, he'd be sequestered to that room in the tower, never being able to leave for 30 years. If he was able to do that at the end of the 30 years, the extremely wealthy man would have to give him half of all that he owned. So the story goes on that the man in the tower initially asks for the finest wine and the finest foods and all this kind of stuff, and then he's finding that he's getting really out of shape and he doesn't feel very good, and so he starts exercising. And as he's exercising, he's feeling better, and he starts to ask for books. And then he asks for a violin, and then he asks for a piano. And as time passes, the man is gaining great knowledge from all the books that he's read and all the poetry that he's read, and he's learned how to play the violin fluently and the piano fluently and speak in different languages and all these things. Well, in the meantime, the man that owns the castle, the man with whom the bet has been made, things have happened and society has changed, and he starts to lose money. And as we approach the end of the 30 years, the man who owns the castle is completely broke, has no money, but he can't own up to this to the man locked in the tower. So he somehow is able to, I believe, work in that castle for a different man, and is able to keep up the illusion for about a year with a man that's locked in the tower. And finally, that year passes, and the man in the tower is released, and he looks at the other man, and the other man is just torn up. This other guy's been locked in the tower for 30 years, and he knows in his heart he can't give him what he promised. He can't fulfill his end of the bet. And before he even has a chance to apologize, the man says, "You owe me nothing. I have recontextualized, rethought, reseen the world and all that it has to offer because of the restraint of being in this room, and I am a greater man than I would ever be." And he walks away. And I don't remember exactly how the story goes for the man that owned the castle. I want to say that he was so distraught that he committed suicide. That sounds a little bit dramatic, but not exactly sure if that's how the story ends. But very interesting, and a great story that teaches a lot of great things, and that is that there's so much to be gained all the time, and in context. If rehearsal's not great today, if it's not great tomorrow, if we go 2 weeks with, the choir director just being really hard on the students, we'll say that. What's the purpose? What's the end result? So a lot of that from chapter 5. The idea of being preoccupied with the outcomes of things. And not thinking so much about the process. It also reminds me a little bit, some things she talks about, and that just sometimes through careful observation, we can see a lot of things, and hopefully, as we get older, see things through different lenses, which reminds me of grounded theory in research. Jeremy Kellett and I have talked about this. I'm trying to set it up now where he can just go out to the schools and videotape without knowing exactly what research questions he has, but letting the experience of watching things happen and being very, very careful to analyze those things maybe will create the questions that sets up the research. Chapter 6, I really like the story about the experiment in the nursing home, and I've heard about this experiment before. It's pretty famous, and some of you may have as well, where half the nursing home is split up into the control group and the experimental group, and the control group goes about their lives, and things have changed very little, although the researchers give each one of them a plant, but they tell them that the workers, the employees in the nursing home will take care of the plant. It's their plant, they keep it in their room, but the nursing home employees will take care of it. These people are also told that events are happening. There's going to be a movie next week, there's going to be visitation next Tuesday. But rather than them being more responsible for setting those things up and being organized with all that, they're told that the employees will take care of it. And the other group, the experimental group, is given the plant, but they're told to take care of it, and they're told to write down how they're going to take care of it, and how much sunshine and how much water and fertilizer and all this kind of stuff. And they're also given a lot more control about the decisions they make every day, what they're going to eat, when they're going to eat. If there is a movie, it's going to be on Thursday or Friday. If so, what time are we going to have snacks? And show that those that had way more responsibility not only seem to be getting better, however you define that in lots of ways. Their health getting better, their mindset getting better, their attitudes getting better. But over the 18 months, there were way fewer deaths in that group. Now, as I read that, I of course thought, well, there are a lot of other variables. How many of these people had severe terminal illness? How many people have been in the nursing home a long time, and that the longevity of that might cause something. And of course, as soon as I thought that, I read the next paragraph that explained that they did consider those variables, and regardless, the experimental group still seemed to have a lot of benefits from having more responsibility, more say about their lives and the things that they were doing. I also liked, she talks pretty much in the whole chapter about mindful aging. A lot of things that we already know, that when people feel like they have no reason to live, they're not in charge of anything, even if it's just just a puppy, a very difficult thing to be in charge of. A puppy, a plant, what they're going to eat, how they're going to do things, scheduling events for their day, that maybe there's less purpose in their life, and therefore their health deteriorates. So very, very interesting. The whole chapter pretty much dedicated to this idea of mindful aging and our mindset as we age. Chapter 7, mindfulness and intuition. Thinking on one's feet is a term I wrote down. Certainly in my research, where I'm looking at directors of ensembles and what they do, I talk a lot about intuition and their ability, in other words, to think on their feet, to take a situation that's happening and come up with a solution very, very quickly. I think it takes a lot of time to develop that. Other researchers like Mariana Cabot talk about it, and she talks about it in her research. Dreyfus and Dreyfus, famous researchers that try to define expertise, and they talk a lot about not only does it take a long time sometimes to develop expertise in teaching, but and that teaching relies on heuristics, and heuristics is things that we gain from experience. If in order to have insight, intuition, you have to be an experienced teacher, does it automatically mean that young teachers are just not going to be very good, or can only be so good? Their research even shows that young teachers have difficulty recalling events that happen in the classroom. They're way less accurate at recalling what happens day to day in the classroom than do older, more experienced teachers. I really like when she talks about what happens when you put questions, things you say to your students in different contexts, or you simply stated in different ways. Talk about the experiment where rather than saying this is a pencil, this is a coffee cup, what is it about this pencil that makes it a pencil? What purpose could this coffee cup serve other than being for coffee? And just the way that you phrase things, making people think or answer differently. Even though it seems very, very simplistic, I think it's incredibly important to how we teach. And I think really good teachers, based on the responses they get from their students, ask their questions differently, give directions differently, until they get what they want, and they look at themselves as the reason why their students aren't responding, aren't producing what they want. I've done this before in my classrooms. I think Jeremy has been a victim to it. It's kind of along these lines of things in different contexts, or looking at things in a way that we're just open and we think through, trust our creativity to maybe come up with solutions. And I've done this ever since I was a high school teacher, working on how people, one, are afraid to be wrong, two, are afraid to be creative in their thinking, which means they use how someone else has defined something for them as absolute, as opposed to looking at things through new lenses. So that the activity I'm talking about, looking at a group of people and saying, okay, can anybody tell me what leather snips are? And I get the same response every time I ask that question. Virtually no one ever answers, and everyone has a blank look on their face, or the look of fear, because they don't know what it is. I'm the teacher, and you typically want to please the teacher, although not always. And the teacher's asking you a question that you can't answer, and you're sensing that no one else is going to answer it, so that adds to even more tension in the room. And once in a while, you'll have a brave person that'll raise their hand and look at you and go, things that snip leather? And you're like, yeah, absolutely, that's it. And then you watch other people in the room. Some people's faces are still kind of blank and still kind of that look of fear, and others are like, I was thinking that, but that seems really simple. Well, sometimes the solutions are really simple, and sometimes we have to step outside of this idea that everything's one way or the other, and that there's always right or wrong, and that there are bad consequences for being wrong. Another words that I use in that experiment with people being willing to take risks. Brick stop. Somebody tell me what a brick stop is. Same kind of thing. Blank stares, and finally someone says, is it just a brick you put in front of the door to stop it from closing? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Another one I use is a key mantle. Somebody tell me what a key mantle is. And every once in a while you have someone raise their hand and go, is it like a mantle above the fireplace, but like maybe a small ledge or something you would put a key or keys on? Yeah, that's it. So as obvious as these things are based on the words, we know what a key is, we know what a mantle is, we know what a brick is, we know what the concept of stop is, we know what leather is, we know what snips are. But we're afraid to use all this knowledge to really step back and think things through. Redefining and relabeling objects, redefining and relabeling concepts, redefining and relabeling processes. As sad as it may be, the more I go out and watch and observe teachers, the more most teachers look alike, and the more ensembles I hear are just not successful. Teaching is less than average. Ensembles are less than average, and it's because they're all doing the same things. They look very much alike. I hear band directors, choir directors, orchestra directors saying things that I've heard other people say, but they're not looking at the process. All they know is that they're not getting what they want. The product is not what they want. So they keep saying the same things over and over again. They keep hoping for that great group of kids that are going to come in and make their band better all at once, or they're hoping that they pick the right music in the right year, that the weather holds off so the marching band can learn their show quickly. And none of those things really are the variables that are going to make their ensembles great. Anyhow, I continue to enjoy the book. I hope you do. As soon as we have more information about tornado and all that kind of stuff, hopefully I'll be able to get back in my office and look at papers and those kinds of things. Those of you that are in this course and in the other, at least one of the other courses that I'm teaching, that we've been handing in assignments. So hope you're well. Hope you're enjoying the book, and take care.